as illogical he was and so forth, and somebody grumbled and said, and he's got green blood and pointed ears. And I heard it. And I said, well, since I can't play green blood and pointed ears, I'll play the character as you said. Would that be okay? Because I can play it many ways, you know. Like, oh, Mr. Spock. Okay, guys, let's get it together. You know, I could play it a whole lot of ways. Why am I so high? Read Mr. Spock as though the character was female. And I was going after that role. And it was a long scene. And when I finished, nobody said anything. And then one of them, the associate producer, said, somebody call Penny and have her call down to personnel and see if Leonard Nimoy has signed his contract. Book that I'm a voracious reader, and so when I'm on a plane, I always have the thick book that you're always going to get around to reading. That's the one I carry on the plane when I go across country or across the border. And I had, this was a bestseller and had just been out about a couple months, still on the #1 list, and it was called Uhura, and it was this great treatise on Africa by North, and everybody in the room either had just bought it, was just trying to read it too, whose wife had read it, cousin, something, brother, and everybody was raving about it. I didn't know that because I had it brought it in and before I went to Europe, but never knew that it was so powerful. And I was about 3/4 of the way through. And before we got to my reading, we sat and talked about the book. And so they asked me if I would wait. And so I said, certainly. So I came out, and the girls are all looking at me. Because interviews usually take about 10 minutes, tops. And they're all looking at me, and Penny jumps up and said, oh, Miss Nichols, would you come with me? And she marched me on to a little anteroom and said, they asked for you to wait. I said, yes, they told me. And so I had my book with me, and I perched myself on a little settee, and I started continued reading my book. And I didn't know, almost an hour had gone by, when the director peeked his head in and said, looked at me and looking for someone, and looked at me and says, what are you doing still here? Okay, Paris, here I come. And I said, you said to wait. And he said, oh, did anyone tell you? No. And he said, you had the role when you walked in, especially after you read, come on, let's go to lunch, big town, we got to talk. Roddenberry called me and he says, meet me for lunch. I want to talk to you. I know you're coming for a fitting. And I'm coming, let's go to lunch. I need to talk to you about your role. So we go to lunch, and I was carded. That just popped up into my mind. I was carded when he ordered champagne. They brought one glass for him. I was so thrilled. I had a 5-year-old son behind it. I was going to take him back to Paris. Anyway, we got to talking over lunch, and Jean said, we're going to start shooting, you know, in a couple of days, within the week. says, I haven't decided on a name for you because I didn't know where I wanted you to come from. And so he said, but I was really fascinated by that book. And so now I've decided that you come from the United States of Africa, but I don't know what name I want, but I love the name Uhura, which is Swahili, meaning freedom. And he said, but I'd like to use it somehow. And I said, I love it too, and especially its meaning, so why don't you do an alliteration of it and soften it and make it Uhura? He said, done. Poured the champagne, we drank to it, and Uhura